All right, good afternoon. Welcome to everyone that has joined us today. We are so appreciative of you taking time out of your schedule to take part in our first parent guardian connection. This is wonderful. Um, this basically was created to provide a virtual platform, a forum rather, for all of our families to connect and to enjoy organic conversations while connecting and fellowshipping with families across Pinellas County and beyond. Our goal is for each family to feel supported, to share resources, to be engaged, and to connect with like minds. Today is our first meeting, and I'm confident this topic is something that we can all relate to, myself included as a mom of three. Not only for the well-being of our children, but also for each of us individually as parents, guardians, and caretakers. The topic for this meeting is the emotional and mental well-being for our children. COVID-19 has caused our daily lives to shift in ways that we could have never anticipated or imagined. We just had to show up and do the work of continuing to protect our loved ones, continue with our careers, and to just continue living. There was simply no way to prepare for this. The impact this pandemic has made on our children is something we've probably all worried about. Today, our guest speaker is Dr. Carlia East. Dr. Carlia East is the founder, CEO of Smile Psychology and Associates LLC, providing counseling via face-to-face and virtual sessions within the state of Florida. She is the founder, CEO of the Sapphire Women Organization, the Sapphire Woman Organization, providing purpose counseling and seminars and workshops throughout the United States, and mental health project director of St. Petersburg College. She attended the University of Central Florida in Orlando and her Bachelor of Arts in Psychology with a minor in sociology. She obtained a Master's of Arts degree in mental health counseling from Argosy University and obtained her PhD in general psychology from Capella University. Dr. East is a clinical psychotherapist, licensed mental health counselor, psychology professor, director, purpose speaker, and author of The Hangover: Overcoming Emotional Addiction, 12 Steps to Emotional Sobriety. She is a bi-weekly contributor on the global podcast Become She, and a recurring writer for Revive magazine. Dr. East also has her own column, Dr. East Speaks, which is featured bi-weekly in Sheen magazine. Last but not least, Dr. East promotes the strength of all in her many empowerment seminars and workshops, which can range from mental health awareness to conversations about race. With laughter and love, she inspires others to reclaim their power, embrace their truth, and design their destiny. Just a few housekeeping tips before we get started. All questions and comments that you have can be placed in our chat. We will have the last few minutes dedicated to answering questions and the concerns that you may have. Please be sure to stay muted. The meeting is being recorded and it will be available on our website, PCSB Parent Advocacy, /Parent Advocacy. Thank you so much, Dr. East, for accepting my invitation to be a part of this important conversation. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kyosha. I really appreciate it. And welcome all of you this evening. I know with all the uncertainty, it's just important for us to gain some knowledge and some information and some security with some of the issues that we're dealing with. So I definitely applaud all of you for being here. I appreciate you for being here. So we can make sure that I'm giving you all these nuggets and all these tips. We're going to go right into our first slide. The first thing that I wanted to tackle is the general emotional feelings that your children may face. And part of that is dealing with COVID-19. Now, we know that in our society right now, we're dealing with quite a few different pandemics, right? That we're just trying to balance and kind of all keep going afloat. We have a medical, concern that is a pandemic globally with the COVID-19. We have a continuation of a racial pandemic. We have a socioeconomic pandemic that is also striving. And so lots of us are just trying to stay afloat. And then on top of that, we've got kids. You know, we've got children, we have those little people that we're taking care of, and they need answers. And we need answers as their parents, as their guardians, as their caregivers, to make sure that we're providing them with the baseline of, you know, acceptance on their level, so that they feel encouraged, that they feel motivated, no matter which decision you all choose to make. So I will cover today some of the emotions of dealing with COVID. I will cover a baseline of how to deal with the conversation about race, right? Having that difficult conversation. I will cover the preparation of anxieties dealing with school, whether you're doing virtual or whether you're doing face-to-face. And I will also just give some tips for you all, because you all need some self-care and some love too. So we'll wrap that up at the end. But first, I want to start with isolation and depression, because this is an area that we may not think that our children are dealing with, but they are. Once children are able to have their own mind and know who they are and know what is going on around them, they can pretty much solve and figure things out by their social context or social cues. And regardless of the fact that we have been social isolating and quarantining and making sure that we're safe, there's another level of that our children are also experiencing, and that is their ability to be free, the ability to move about. And so I want to paint this picture so that you understand, not only from the perspective of being a caregiver, but as a human being, because this is really what we're looking at in our children. The only way that we're going to fully understand how to help them adapt to some of the changes is that we understand how we can adapt to those changes, because they are looking for us, right? Or looking up to us to kind of guide them. And so the one thing I want you all to recognize is that we all, when I say we all, I mean the entire world, is in a state of angst, is in a state of worry, is in a state of concern. You know, if you've been alert enough to be aware of what's going on in the world today, there are some concerns on either side, no matter which one is pulling to you more or the other. Because of that, and because of the social quarantining, what has happened is that our blueprint of being able to move about freely, being able to go and do, has been constricted quite a bit, and we've been confined. Our children have also been confined because we are their transportation, right? To get from A to Z and to do things. They also are being confined at a period of time where many of them are, you know, developing their own personalities. They're transitioning from childhood to adolescence, and there's all these other things that are going on with them. And now we're expecting them to be still and understand that we can't go, we can't do. So because of that, the first thing that you should be doing with your children is being very honest about what the situation is, what we're dealing with, because children can see through fakeness a mile away. And the one person that they come to is us. And if we are not transparent and honest, right, about exactly what is happening, about why, some of these situations are happening, why we're quarantining, then how do we expect them to formulate those ideas, right, that they're capable of doing if we're not transparent with them first? So we have to be honest about what is happening. And then we have to be aware that children are susceptible to all the many emotional levels that we as adults are susceptible to. The difference is they don't have a blueprint to work through and to navigate, right? They don't have that structural component built out for them. We have experience, we've had life, we've had comings and goings, and so we've kind of learned these balances. They haven't. And so I want to start out with some of the signs that you should pay attention to first. And so if you look over here, when you're dealing with depression, if you look at the PowerPoint, the top thing that you want to look at is changes in the mood, right? I'm not going to read everyone off because we're all here, we all can read. So the top thing that you want to do is be aware of any mood changes. And so if your child is normally very talkative and now they aren't so talkative, or they're quiet in times they would normally speak, then that might be an opportunity for you to explore, the conversation. If they would normally sit amongst the family or the group in the room, and now they're not, now they're isolating themselves, now they're hiding away. If they're making just outright statements of foreboding, of negativity, of, well, there's no point in me being here anyway, or if they begin to start feeling worthless or expressing those feelings or any of those things, we have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful of just sometimes the sighs that we hear in our children. I can ask my son to do something, he's 5 years old, and I'll say, Savant, I need you to go do A, B, and C. And he will, but he may sigh. And I say, well, what's up with the sigh? What's going on with that? And that gives him an opportunity to express what he's experiencing. If we don't ask the questions, children will not answer. Teens will not answer if we do not ask the question. Partly because our children nowadays are exposed to far more than we ever were exposed to. So that's number one. And I say this all the time, I love the opportunities that they have and all the choices that they have. But as you all know, sometimes too many choices can be too overwhelming, right? And so there's that piece of it. The other piece is that children may not be honest with what they're feeling because they feel guilt or shame about it. You know, they understand that they're feeling different than maybe how their friends are feeling, or maybe how social media is portraying, right, for them to feel. And so they don't want to be maybe a burden to us as the ones that take care of them and provide for them. So they may not speak up, you know, and this can be you and your kid that have the coolest relationship. You talk about everything, you feel like they're wide open with you. But when it comes to someone admitting that there's something stirring on inside of them, that there's something stirring with them mentally, as an adult, it's hard for us to admit we have high blood pressure and take our medication on time. So how do you think children are going to deal with the fact that they may be feeling a little bit different? So you want to call a spade, ask the questions, and then know those signs. Here are some of the basic signs of depression that you can look for. These are not all of them, but these are some of the general signs to kind of help you. Now, the first thing you do is you foster comfort. So you encourage your child to have that conversation with you. And I often say that a way for me to encourage is to self-share, to self-divulge. Oftentimes when we play the role of caregiver, parent, you know, person older, and we don't bring ourselves down to that space of just being a human being with feelings and emotions, then our children begin to disconnect from us in that particular realm, to where they don't feel as comfortable as they should to just kind of divulge if they're having a sucky day or if they're not feeling quite right. And then if we do not do a good job of being honest with some of the trials and tribulations that we may have, how can we expect our children to be honest with us when they are going through those similar things? So example, if my son comes up to me and he says, "Mommy, are you frustrated?" And he said this when he was like 3, and it blew me away. And I said to him, "Yeah, I am actually frustrated." And he said, "Why?" Now, of course, we don't want to give our kids all the details, or they never want to grow up. So what we do is we try to provide them with just enough information to say, well, you know what, mom's frustrated because she's got a lot of work to do and she's trying to balance it out. You know, or mom's frustrated because she and, you know, me and dad are just having a little argument, a little spat, but we'll be okay. So it's those types of things. What that does for our children, and that lets them know that we're human, which is something that they need more than anything. That is what builds trust with them, not the fact that you're DNA connected or that you're the caregiver, but because they see you now as a human being who's now approachable. And so foster that communication. The next thing that you want to do is use positive reinforcement. Even as adults, we enjoy being acknowledged and recognized for the great works and the good things that we do. And so our children need to have that same type of environment. And so overly providing that positive praise is a great way to assist that child in staying motivated and feeling like they're doing great things. Remember, when you have someone that is dealing with feeling bad, feeling meh, feeling depressed, feeling sad, they're not necessarily thinking of how awesome they are, or, you know, how they did a great job on their Lego set, or they did an awesome job helping out in the kitchen. They're not necessarily aware of all of those things. And so it's super vital and important that we make them aware that we are noticing the good things. Even though kids are technically supposed to do what we say do, they still lack a little bit of appreciation, right? And so you want to make sure that you foster that. Have goals that you have them set for themselves weekly. And this is key, this is vital. One of the issues with individuals that suffer from a depressive mind state is it suppresses the way that you feel. It suppresses your motivation, your energy. You know, sometimes it causes you to sleep too much, not sleep enough. So there's all these different fluctuations. But one of the key things that I try to put in place is goal setting, especially goals for your child that are quick rewards, which is really what they need right now. And I know we teach them to work hard and slow and steady is the pace, but when you're dealing with a child that's having an emotional imbalance, when they're not feeling, you know, that they're as strong or prideful as they should be, then you want to give them attainable goals. So you might want to take something, a chore or an activity that they already do or something that they're inspiring to do, and turn that into maybe a weekly or bi-weekly activity to where you give them bonuses for the fact that they've achieved it, where you let them know that you're super proud. Just like we call up aunties and uncles and everybody to tell them how frustrated we are about our kids or when they mess up, we have to make those same diligent phone calls when they're awesome. And we have to do it in front of them so that they see that we're recognizing that they're awesome. Okay. And so definitely have them set goals, give them verbal praises. The next thing that you want to do is really practice your patience with uncertainty. And what I mean by that uncertainty is that children fluctuate in moods, right? And so one day he or she may be super polite, and the next day they might be super crabby. And a part of us wants to say, wait a minute now, don't be disrespectful. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that they're going through something. You know, we're going through something. So what do you think their little bodies and little brains are trying to manage? Be a little bit more patient with them. I'm not saying tolerate disrespect or anything like that, but understand that because they may shift, because they may come off a little bit more aggressive in the response than they normally would, is probably because they just want to get out of the house and run around and do stuff. And it came out verbally. You know, I say again, my 5-year-old, I'll say, Savant, I'll call him, I'm coming. Wait a minute. Who's yelling at who right now? And I'll ask him, did you mean to yell at me like that? Instead of saying, who you yelling at? You know, getting all bass in my voice. I'll ask him, did you mean to talk to me like that? He's like, no, mommy. I said, well, what's wrong? And then we have the conversation. So again, ask why. Why are you responding to me this way? Why are you upset? Why are you frustrated? Instead of us assuming that it's just disrespect or they're not listening or paying attention. There's millions of things that are distracting our children right now, just like they're distracting us. Number 4, I talked about that kind of already, is your transparency, but also to reframe negative thoughts. So when your kid says to you, you know, mommy, I can't do anything right. Like, who hasn't heard that statement? Like, you know, mommy, I'm terrible at this. What I do is say, you know what, you may be struggling with that, but look how cool you did this over here. Like, look how awesome you were at this and this. And I'll probably point out at least 3 things so that he can hear them repetitively, like you did this, you did this, you did that, you can do that before. So reminding them, reframing that negative process of I can't do or I'm not worth anything, and then giving them that value and showing them the value. Because sometimes when we speak it, kids hear us, but it's nice for them to be able to have physical touch or actually see something brilliant that they've done. So that's when you pull out that certificate or that drawing, or you point out how awesome they were able to make their bed this morning or get dressed, or how they helped a neighbor in their yard. You want to inspire that motivation and make sure that they stay focused on the great works that they're always doing. And then lastly, of course, you're going to seek support. Now, the reason why I said seek support and not therapy is because I don't feel that every person requires a therapist. And yes, this is a therapist saying it. Sometimes your children just need a safe space for them to get their frustrations out. It can be a pastor, it can be a community member, their cousin, it can be any of those safe places. And so I will encourage you to identify a safe person, a safe place for your kid. My safe person is not me. That's not fair, right? He doesn't want to always talk to me about every little thing. What if it's about me that he wants to talk about? He can't even say what he needs to say. So, you know, his cousins are his safe space. His aunties are his safe space. And he knows that he can pretty much say whatever he's feeling without judgment in front of them, and they will guide him because they know how in which we choose to raise our son in our household. So you want to make sure that those things are on the same page, but provide them that support that's not you. Provide them that friend that's not you, because it allows them to feel trusted, and it allows them a safe space for them to say the things that they know they couldn't say to you, just like we couldn't say to our mamas, right? So that's just kind of the summation of dealing with isolation and depression. So we're going to move on to our next slide, which is really going to focus on having the hard conversation, right? So this really can apply to any hard conversation that needs to be had, but I'm particularly speaking about race because that is difficult depending on the household, you know? And so for the purposes of this, I'm giving you some solid information. I may discern by saying, you know, white or black. It's not that I am trying to disregard or dismiss any other cultures that are here. I'm just using that for a baseline example, okay? So I want everybody to feel comfortable with that. So the first thing that I think has to happen with race is for us to acknowledge that it's okay that we have not had the conversation yet, right? So everybody take a side if you haven't had the conversation yet. Like, it's okay. When you know, this is the fact. When something is going on inside of our communities or inside of our environments, that doesn't mean that it touches us at home, right? It touches our community, it touches us on the block, but that doesn't mean it comes into our home. And so we may not always have the conversation that maybe globally, you know, is happening, or we may not have the conversation that our neighbors are having. If you do not have maybe an LGBTQI, you know, friend or ally or supporter individual, you may not have that conversation about inclusivity in your household. You know, if you live in a predominantly white neighborhood and really don't have a lot of interactions with people of color, not intentionally, but just because of demographics, you may be less likely to have that conversation about, you know, maybe police brutality on African-American males or those types of conversations. You're less likely to have them, right? And so my point is that first we have to acknowledge the fact that we may not be versed in having the conversation. But now that you've logged on, now you're all versed, right? Now we can all have a conversation because we understand that it's okay if you're just starting here. Okay, so with that, let's get started. Number one, see what they know, first of all. Ask them straight out. You will be surprised at the responses you get when you just ask kids straight out, how do you feel about racism? Do you know what racism is? And for your smaller children, because I have a 5-year-old, right? So from your smaller children, I ask the same question. Because what I find is that when we ask questions or when we down the language or dumb down the language, we are not doing a service because we're not delivering the actual truth of what is taking place. I'm not saying use derogatory language, but racism is what it's called. And so we need to give it a name when we are educating and explaining that to our children. And so I asked my son, I said, honey, do you know what racism is? And he said, no, like, he's like race cars when they go really fast on the tracks. And I was like, no, baby, that's not racism. That's being an awesome racer. But then I explained to him, I said, remember when we were watching Elmo and Elmo's dad was telling him, you know, I gave him a Sesame Street example because we had watched that show. If you haven't watched that show, say, hey, do you know that some people may not like mommy because mommy is considered black or brown or chocolate? And I give them a minute to think about it. Do you know that someone may not like Stephanie? That's a white friend of his because Stephanie's white. And he's like, what? And I give him a second. Pause. That's the next thing. Ask the question, see what they know, give them a little bit of example for the smaller kids that's age appropriate, and then pause and watch their brains turn. I mean, watch their brains turn because they're trying to figure it out. Now, next you call it what it is, right? Because we have to be clear. We're so sick and tired of us getting half-truths, right, and false information that the last thing we want to do is bring that information to our kids. So be 100% honest. Be clear that racism and racial violence is wrong. There is not a gray area for racism, people. There is not a fence to ride on, okay? It's just flat out wrong. Just like bigotry and sexism and all of those things, you know, are wrong, so is racism. What that does is that sets the tone for your child to now know this is the baseline of what I should feel about this word. It's wrong, right? And for some kids, maybe that's as much as they need to know at that point, that this is wrong, this is what it looks like, and so I'm going to love everybody, right? That's kind of the basic lesson. But then you continue to move on for your older kids that can handle the conversation. You turn this now into a learning opportunity. You've asked them what they know. You've given them a pretty decent baseline of what it is. You've told them that it's wrong. And now you're going to talk about the history, okay? In order for us to be educated on anything, we have to learn about it. We had to learn math, science, history, arithmetic, all those different things. We have to learn about racism. We have to learn about systemic racism. And there are age-appropriate books and resources that are out there that you can order for your kids. And I mean literally Amazon. I went to Amazon and ordered a book called Chocolate Me. And I ordered this book probably when my child was 3 years old because he was in pre-K, right? So he's having experiences with kids. No sooner than he started reading this book, my son comes home and he says, Mommy, Caleb made fun of my hair today. And I said, what did Caleb say? He was like, your hair is all curly. You can't even get a comb through it. You know, how do you comb your hair? And I asked my son, I said, how did you respond? He said, I told him that my hair was chocolate and I'm sweet, you know, and I was like, that's right. You know, it's like a proud mommy, like you're so excited. We had all kinds of McDonald's that day. But I'm pointing this out because we're talking about 3 years old. Did y'all catch that? 3 years old. And so the ideologies of being a racist is not necessarily prevalent, but lessons that our children are being taught from individuals that may not agree with inclusivity, right? That may not agree with equality. They're also in the schools, in the environments, in the neighborhoods that your children are in. And it's not that we are scaring our children, we are arming them with the tools necessary to stand up for themselves, stand up for what they believe in, and be on the correct side of right. That's what you're doing. You're prepping them for that. You're prepping them to use words instead of their fists, to express their angers and their frustrations when they may be called out of their name. Or when your child who's white has a black friend and he or she is treated differently or disrespectfully because they have a white or black friend. You know, that type of thing. That's what we're arming them with. So you want to find those age-appropriate resources that are able to talk about racism in a way that each child, no matter their age, can understand. After you've educated them about it, you know, give them a couple days to process, right? Then you ask them, well, how'd you feel about that? You know, what scared you? For older kids, you can use the word trigger. Little kids respond to scare, you know, because they're, you know, things are scary for them. Older kids are like, I'm not scared of anything. So we have to use a growing up word, like, what are your triggers? So you throw the trigger word in there. But you're basically just asking them, what is it that you're feeling now that you've been educated, right? Now that you have more information, how do you feel? Now you're having that dialogue. After you know what scares them, this is a good thing because now you're able to deal with the fear by creating opportunity. That's what we do as therapists. When a client comes to me and says that there's a deficit in their life, there's a fear, there's a concern, my job is to create a coping strategy to help them to navigate that area. So as parents and caregivers, right, our job is to provide certain coping strategies for our kids to help them be able to navigate that. So when you talk about creating those opportunities of what scares them, maybe teaching them, okay, so if that scares you, if someone says that to you, let's think of some really positive things that you can say back to them, you know, or a way that you can respond to them so that you have the words. Because one thing about our children is when they get flustered and upset, they go into tunnel vision. I know y'all have seen this because they act like they don't hear anything, right? They go into tunnel vision. They can't use their peripherals worth anything. Like they don't know how to look right or left. They're just like stuck. And when they get emotionally pulled in front of other children, now there's an audience or there's a grouping, even if it's online. Hello, bullying, audience grouping happens there too. You want to give them the power to be able to stick up for themselves and use the words that are appropriate to express how they feel. It also allows them to get involved in maybe using their voice in a different way. So because we have children using TikTok and Facebook and all these different platforms that they use for music and videos and dance and art and all these different things, many of them want a way to kind of speak their truth and to kind of say how they feel. And so as parents, we have to give them that opportunity. Now, that does not mean that every child is going to say, I want to put Black Lives Matter, you know, on my Facebook page, or they're going to black out the profile picture. It may mean that they put a hand of a white hand and a black hand clasping, you know, on their page, or they put a beautiful dance, you know, from people of different colors. It's about finding the positivity and finding the safety in them using social media, which is there whether we like it or not, in a way that they can foster the type of message that they want to foster, in a way that they can use their voice in a respectful way. And you're also teaching them how to use social media appropriately for when they become older. You're teaching them how to problem solve. You're teaching them how to, you know, have conversations with you that are difficult. And guess what you also are doing is you're still being transparent, because in this whole process, you're learning too. Even if you're Black, you're learning about racism. Hello, don't know everything, right? We're always learning. And so it's never a feeling of guilt or a feeling of I've dropped the ball or why didn't I have this conversation? Forget that. The time is now to be active, to have it. And then the last thing that you want to do is visualize the positivity. So right now, I would probably say for a young Black male, it's probably hard for them to visualize the positivity, you know, just because of what they've been seeing in social media and probably what they see next door, right? You know, some of our children are not, there's not 6 degrees, you know, 6 degrees of separation for many of us. We're right here in the thick of it. So when you visualize positivity, you're giving them this mustard seed. We know what that mustard seed is, right? That's hope. You're giving them hope. So for those of you that have children that are in these environments and they're African-American males, show them the African-American male that made it out of that environment. Show them that example. Don't show them the famous person that's making $1 billion on TV. That's not relatable. But someone who comes from a similar neighborhood, someone who's maybe, maybe only 5 or 6 years older than me, but being positive, that is what motivates me. That is what pushes them, not us giving them examples of us. We old. They don't want to see us as examples. They want to see their own people as examples. And so that also means that we as parents and caregivers have to seek out information so that we're bringing that information to our kids. If we can find, and this is pre-COVID, I'm using this dialogue, but if we can find concert tickets, the best shoes, the best clothes, cars, and everything else, we can find resources. We can find this information for our kids. And then lastly, teach them to practice kindness. In a world that we live in right now, where you wake up to negativity, you wake up to negativity, you go to bed to negativity, you can't even have a meal without negativity popping up. We have to make sure that we are inserting intentionally positivity throughout our days. And that means also practicing kindness, even at a time where your heart doesn't feel so kind. That means answering questions, even at a time you don't want to answer questions. I am not the African-American guru of all Black women, right? Of the Black race. But I get asked a lot of questions. I have to be kind enough to understand that, yeah, I'm dealing with it myself because I am Black, right? So, and I have a Black husband and a Black child, and I'm dealing with that. But there are folks that need some answers. And I've been put in a position, whether I like it right now or not, to provide those answers. That's my duty. When we have information that we can spread awareness, like these types of forums, that is your duty to spread that awareness. And so practice kindness. When people come up to you with negativity, be kind. Don't respond, negatively. When I had a woman come up to me and say, "Oh my God, your son is the cutest Black boy I've ever seen," I had an option at that point. I could have either become a statistic and responded the way that the media may have portrayed me at that moment, or I could choose to be an educator, right? And rise above it and choose to understand that she may not have meant that in the way that it came across. I have to understand that maybe she hasn't been exposed to anybody of color face to face except me and my kid, and she meant that. And so I said to her, I said, "That's really sweet. I appreciate that." I said, "But why can't he just be the cutest boy you've ever seen, period?" I did it as a way to be humorous, but it also checked her in a way that she was like clutching her pearls, like, oh, I'm so sorry, and she knew she had misstepped. But that was an opportunity for me to yell at her. There was an opportunity for me to teach her, for me to show her. And so with you providing your children with an outline of how to navigate their emotions, how to research. They research everything else, right? And you give them that opportunity to use a voice, you'll find that they will stick up and stand up more than we ever thought that they would, okay? So that's that one. Let's move along. Now this is the big one. This is the one y'all all came on here for. What? Okay, so this is the one that everybody's here for, right? I got kind of timed out for a second. All right, school. This is a thick one because we're trying to navigate these feelings of angst and anxiety. Now, I will tell you this. I cannot tell you whether you should or shouldn't or what decision you should make as far as what's best for your family. But I will say this. We have to do a better job of respecting everyone's choices, no matter what those choices may be. I do not live in anyone else's household. I do not live in anyone else's bank account. I do not understand the dynamics and how everyone flows in their life. I can only do what's best for me and my family and make those accommodations and concessions. You can only do what's best for your family. So for those of you that are getting negativity from other people that don't live in your household, that don't pay your bills, that don't monitor your kids, please tell them, "Thank you, I appreciate your concern, but we've got it from here." You handle your situation with your children in the way that you feel comfortable. If you need to send your children to school in order for your household to still be a household, then they go to school. If you have the opportunity to keep them home and you can still maintain, then keep them home. Ultimately, it's you, and no one gets to guilt you in that decision. So I just want to say that because it's getting on my nerves. Now, let's jump into how do we deal with these anxieties that we're facing with any of the decisions. So here are some tips on the side, and this is for all parents. And then I gave some particularly for virtual parents, and particularly for those that are Florida virtual. Now, many of us are choosing, are pretty much based upon the statistics, right? We chose between options 1 and 2, right? So option 1 would be go back to school face-to-face, social distancing, and all those CDC requirements in place. And then of course, option 2 would be the distance learning, as I called it, right? And so where you're still on that schedule, the first thing that you have to do is know that whether your kid is on that schedule or on any schedule, they're going to be dealing with some anxiety. So you want to acknowledge them and validate those feelings. First of all, remember what I said, always ask the question. It really starts out with that. Like that's how dialogue begins, is asking the question. So acknowledge that they may be feeling some anxiety that they're not talking about. So that means that you may actually have to bring it up yourself and be like, hey, how are you feeling about your decision with school or our decision with school? How do you feel about either being there or not being there, or whatever you have decided? Ask them that question. Ask them if they're, are you feeling kind of funky about it? And I use words instead of, anxious, because sometimes children would be like, oh, I don't have anxiety. As adults, we don't want to, have anything. And so it may be difficult for our children to, for us to say, are you experiencing anxiety right now? They're like, no, they don't want to tell you. But you can say, hey, are you feeling kind of meh about the semester? Are you feeling kind of funky about things? Are you afraid? Are you nervous? That's a good one. Are you nervous about, what's coming up? And just give them an opportunity to kind of gather their thoughts and express to you how they're feeling. Then validate that. And how you validate is not saying, oh, well, you shouldn't be nervous, everything will be fine. That's not validating. Validating is saying, you know what, I can understand how you could feel that way, especially when it was this or with this, and give them examples of how you understand why they feel the way they feel. Next, be encouraging, but be honest. So what I mean by being encouraging and honest is you want to motivate them that whatever decision your household has made is the best for, for your well-being and for your overall survival as a family, right? So you want to talk about that, but you also want to encourage them that we're going to make it through this, but you don't want to lie. You don't want to give false promises to our children. Remember, they're looking at us as being the know-it-all of everything, even though sometimes they don't act like it. They do. So they look at us for that. And if we are not, if we are giving them false hopes, if we say everything will be fine by next year, we don't know if everything is going to be fine by next year, right? And so it's not that you're scaring your child by expressing uncertainty. You're being honest with them that mommy and daddy, we trying to figure it out too. So we in this thing together. All right. So make sure that you're encouraging and that you're honest with them about some of the hurdles, some of the hiccups. So you want to talk to them, hey, with face-to-face schooling, these are going to be some of the struggles and challenges that you're going to deal with. Let's prep. How do we prepare for this? If you have smaller kids that have to wear masks, make a mask that they love. Let them be a part of the mask. We already know that it's difficult to get anybody the age of anything to wear anything around their face on a regular basis, but especially kids, right? And so what I've done is I try to make the mask an opportunity for my kid. So I let him pick out the fabric. If he wants to put patches on it, I let him put patches on the mask. It's just an opportunity for him to be proud about his Avengers / Black Panther / Cars, whatever, mask he wants to have. And he's more likely to wear it because he wants to show it off. Okay. So it's kind of like, it's a little trickery, but it's like good trickery, for our kids. So make them a part of that discussion, a part of that mask wearing. They might want to make them themselves. So again, instead of looking at it as a no, warning type of thing, look at it as this is something we're embracing. Let's make it awesome. Find your diva daughters, get some bling on their mask, just find something creative that they can do. So the next thing is to face the fear. So this is all about that preparation piece, because what that does, I kind of went ahead, but what that does is that focuses on fostering a sense of control. Remember, our children don't feel like they're in control of anything right now. Choices of kind of being made for them in their best interest, and they're not given the basic freedoms like, sports and extracurricular activities and band and music and art, and all these things that they were normally involved in. So we want to give them back as much, as many pieces of power, right, as we can give them. And so when you allow them to face that fear and prepare, you're empowering them to feel more powerful than the fear. Right? And when they're more powerful than the fear, then they don't allow the fear to kind of get at them. Okay. So next thing you want to do is then model positive coping behaviors. So what that means is you can't say, do as I say, not as I do. Like you can't be running around having like breakdowns every 5 minutes in the house and then expect your kids to have it together. Like you can't expect that. So you have to foster and create and model the behaviors that you want them to see. And so that means being a part of those decision processes, being a part of that preparation for the school day, being a part of those conversations, and then them seeing how you're navigating your day. Next, you want to do is connect with the teachers. I know we do that every semester, but now you kind of want to connect a little bit more than you would before, just because our children are a lot more susceptible to emotional pushes and pulls right now. And so we want to make sure that we're a little bit, we're kind of being helicopter parents and caregivers right now, until we see how this goes, right? We're trying this out, and we got to see how this goes. So to connect with your teachers, express to your teachers, hey, if I would say that, hey, Savant is maybe having a difficult time, dealing with this, being online, or Savant may have a difficult time, connecting with other kids because he's really afraid of COVID, or whatever it is, communicate that with the teachers, so that now the teachers know, hey, this is something I can look out for, so I can foster, more of a camaraderie in the classroom and kind of bring them together. And then that way the teacher also has a heads up on the sensitivity issue that your child is dealing with. So that way we can avoid labeling and typecasting, and all those different things, because the teacher is already aware of some of the concerns of the child. Now, create a cohort or squad. I am all about squads. Like, I live for my squads. A squad is just a group of people that have your back, that get it, that understand what you're going through. So I would recommend for all parents and caregivers, y'all need to have 2 squads. You need to have your school squad and what you do behind closed door squad, right? That's your girlfriends and your guy friends. You need to have 2 separate squads. The reason why you need a school squad is you need like-minded parents that get the frustrations that you're dealing with, that are trying to balance the things that you're trying to balance. It's an opportunity for you guys to connect with one another, for you to vent with one another, so you can say the things that you may not say at the PTA meeting on Zoom. It's an opportunity for you to kind of get those types of things out, and that camaraderie, and you as the parents to have some support, right? Because we're talking about supporting our children, but if the foundation is not strong, meaning us, how strong are our kids really going to be? Not so much. So you want to make sure that you create that squad. So have one specifically that deals with, other parents that are at that school, so that you guys can share, maybe create, foster play dates, that type of stuff, which is really awesome. And then have your squad that you can just vent to about how you're mad at everything, which gives you a safe space to get some of those emotions out that we sometimes, because of society and because we feel like we're always on, can't express those the way that we should. Now, to segue over to virtual, and I chose to talk about virtual mainly because I'm talking about individuals that may not necessarily be on on the Florida virtual program, because as you know, there's not necessarily a time to log in and time to log out. And I know some of us are still kind of trying to make those decisions, even with deadlines, passed or what have you, but I would be remiss if I didn't touch on that. I think with virtual, and this may come up in general with just some of the things that we're dealing with, we have to let go of traditional timelines. We are not dealing in traditional times, and so traditional timelines have to be kind of stretched. And so, when school starts and ends, that's a flexible timeline. Maybe, giving your kids a little bit more flexibility this semester because of all the emotional stuff that they're dealing with, is helpful, giving them a little bit more leniency, a little bit more, time to stay up at night. I'm not saying, be, disrespectful as a parent and not have rules, but just understand that our children are stressed and they're taxed out. And we can't keep them on just, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, when society is like 1, 5, 8, 6, 5, 14. You know what I mean? So we have to be flexible to kind of move around with that and let go of those traditional timelines and be more flexible. Also, we have to set realistic expectations for your family. Some of us are still working, whether we're working from home or working face-to-face. We're not getting in till late. You know what that means? You're not going to bed till late. That is just what it is. So we have to adjust ourselves, is that we're not being poor parents. That's just our schedule. Our schedule is not a traditional one, and we can't beat ourselves up for that. It's about, opportunities. And that takes us to the last thing. Learning happens everywhere. Okay? Learning happens everywhere. So regardless of whether, your child misses a day or is unable to catch up or is behind, you can turn washing the dishes into a mathematical equation. How many forks do you have? Give me all the forks. What alphabet does fork begin with? And that's just what I do with my kid because he's 5. So I'm giving you that example of the creativity that you can do in the home to involve the children, involve your kids. And what that does is that definitely helps them with their anxiety and depression, because it's giving them a place, that safe space, right? to vent and to divulge and to get that information out. Last but not least, I got to focus on you all. Now, I'm giving you, I think, some pretty hardcore nuggets, right, that you all can take and use. At least I hope I have, that you can take and use. And hopefully I validated some of the things that you're already doing, so that you're on the right track. But I want to talk about you, because you are important. You is important. You is kind. You are all those things. And I think that we forget that as we're adulting, as we're parenting, as we're, taking care of all of our children and those different things, we forget ourselves. We will sacrifice ourselves, and that's what good parents and caregivers do. But I want you to take time for you, because your kids, whether they are children, adolescents, or teenagers, they still are looking to us. Whether they look to us with one eye, whether they look at us with side eye, they still are looking to us for answers, right? They need that guidance. So I want to make sure you're good. Number one, I need you to acknowledge how you're feeling about stuff. What is upsetting you? What are some of your, your feelings? Because as you're acknowledging their feelings, you need to know how you're feeling about stuff. And I would recommend that you do that before you even start the conversation with them, right? Because you kind of want to do some self-explorating, exploration yourself, so that we can come across as knowledgeable as possible and really leave the opportunity for discovery for them, and it's okay that we catch on and learn with them eventually, but they need to know that they can trust that we are okay with asking them these questions, that we're okay with having this conversation. And if we haven't really done our own self-searching to figure out how we're feeling about some of these things, that's going to come out, in the conversation. And the goal is to teach our children how to express themselves appropriately, not aggressively, right? Next is, you need a safe space for your thoughts. Sometimes that safe space isn't always your squad, right? Sometimes that safe space is a journal, or a notepad on the side of the bed. I mean, if I asked you to raise your hands, I bet half of the room would go up with how many of us go to bed with something on our minds. Or we toss and we wake up with something, right? It's like constantly there, and it interrupts our sleep. And in a lot of cases, it's something that, first of all, we can't even tackle till in the morning, right? Because stuff doesn't open up till 8. Or it's a situation that's completely out of our control, but we're vacillating, meaning it's going around and around and around. Therapeutic tip: get you a sheet of paper. Don't put it in the phone. That's an electronic device. We want organic. We want you to feel the release emotionally, and you want you to feel the release physically. So you write it out, okay? You write it out. So just leave that on the side of the bed. So any thoughts that you have, you can say, you know what? I got it out of here. I put it there. I know it's safe there. I know I can come back and pick it up and address it when I'm ready and when I need to address it. So that way you don't, keep yourself up and alert saying, okay, don't forget, as you're falling back to sleep. Like, how many of us have done that? Okay. So save space, have a safe space for your thoughts as well. Limit your negativity, and that includes people in media. This is so important. That includes family. That includes family, which is friends that are family. That includes all of that. That doesn't mean that you are not being there for individuals, but remember, your priority, number one, is yourself, and number two are the individuals that you're responsible for, okay? And unless you are a caregiver to an older adult, your girlfriends and guy friends don't count. We love them, but they don't count, right? Your cousins and your aunties and all that don't count. You have to make sure that you are limiting negativity. So if you have that friend or, that family member that has the type of conversation that you have to prepare for, y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Place them at the end of your day, maybe. You know what I mean? Place them at the end of your week. Give yourself time to work through some of the things that you need your energy for. Because that's first. Because if you start with that person first, they've sucked all the energy out, the motivation, the positivity that you need to give to yourself and give to your family. And we don't want to allow that. And so, put those people on the shelves where, in hierarchy where they belong. And it's okay to sit them there. You're just pushing the pause button, and then you'll come back. As far as media, I will recommend you finding 2 primary media outlets that you trust, right? 2 primary ones that you trust. And let those be where you get your information from, right? And I would also say limit how much time I kind of did my own little research on myself where I played, CNN, that's one of my go-to stations. So I played CNN basically like all day, in the background when I was working and doing stuff. And I kind of wrote in a journal every night how I felt. And the more that I just had it on and constantly being reminded of all the negativity, the more negative I felt at night, the more worried I felt at night, the more insecure, the more paranoid I felt at night. And so that is my own little research, but it's true. The more you are bombarded with messages, whether it's true or not, right? And it's true. If it's negative, it attaches to you, and that's all you hear. And so I say limit that to just need to know information. I check the news in the morning so I can know what happened while I was asleep and I can prepare. And because I'm dealing with people on a regular basis, I need to know what's going on because folk want to talk about it, right? And then at night, I review just so I can prepare myself for the next day and know if there were any developments. So limit that. Also, take your vitamins, folks. We're always pushing Flintstone vitamins and all kinds of stuff on our kids and olive vitamins, and we don't even take care of our own vitamins. Take your vitamins. 2 things that should definitely be taken if you're not. You want to take an omega-3 if you're not taking that, and you definitely want to take a B12 complex if you're not taking that. These are really good for the brain. We're talking about brain health, okay? Brain health is important because the healthier your brain is, the stronger your brain is to fight off anxiety, stress, depression. And those 2 items have been proven, clinically proven, to help ward off some of those feelings of stress and anxiety and depression. So your omega-3 is like your fish oil, which you can find in fatty foods like albacore tuna, salmon, things of that nature. And then of course your B12 complex gives you that B6, gives you that clarity, that energy. So those are great things that you want to kind of hang on to and stay focused on. And then lastly is your self-care. Now I put a couple things here for self-care because right now we're all kind of on a budget, right? We're all trying to figure out how we're managing financially, even if some of us are just preparing for the future. So I think what's really good is that number 1, you rest, which means disconnect. I know in the beginning of COVID, there was a lot of keep yourself busy, stay on the schedule, don't get sedative. And that's true, but you also need to give yourself, your body, your mind, your spirit time to disconnect, time to decompress, time to get away from it because you need time to reset too, right? And so don't be guilty if you choose a Sunday, which is my day. I share this with people all the time. Sofa Sunday. I do not get off the sofa. I get out of the bed, I take off my nightgown, I put on a house dress. Yes, my grandmother would be so proud. And I get right back on the sofa. And that is where I live. And so that's just my day to disconnect from social media, to disconnect from the negativity and just be with my family, to cook or to do whatever, garden or do whatever it is that I want to do, okay? Exercise is key. So walking, getting just outside, period, and getting that vitamin D. Step outside of that computer office, corner that you set to do your work in and get outside, and be amongst nature and hear the birds. We have to do that. Just building your cardiovascular, just walking, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day is going to be helpful for you de-stressing. And if you walk in the morning or do any physical activity in the morning, it sets the pace for how your body is going to manage stress throughout the rest of the day. And I'm not saying you have to be a triathlon. I'm literally saying walk around the block. That's it. Just walk around the block and you're starting your day with bringing your heart rate up, but also allowing the resting heart rate to be lower because you've exercised and you're burning more calories throughout the day. Laughter is key. When you are taking those breaks that you need for yourself, find something humorous, find something that brings you joy, call that girlfriend up that or guy friend up that has no sense whatsoever, but you love them, and laugh. Laughter heals. It really does. It's the break that we need from sadness. It's the break that we need from crying. It's to laugh and to enjoy and be happy for the positives that we do have in our lives. Because folks, we got a lot of positives that are in our lives right now. We're all on this call together. That's a bonus, right? You get to be exposed to me. Like, I don't know how more positive we can be with that. But really, use humor, use positivity to remind you of the good things. Use this time, as much as it may be scary, to reconnect with the individuals that you love, reconnect with yourself, and build stronger children and stronger minds. So that is my spiel. I hope that it's been super, super helpful. I know I enjoyed giving it. Let's see, I have a couple questions here. Is it safe for teens to take omega-3 and B12 complex? I will honestly say, because I'm not a medical professional, that no, we don't want to give that to your younger teens. Now, some teens, because of the way that they've developed, especially if they've gone through puberty already, it may be okay for them to have those types of supplements. And they have supplements like that for children. I think you just got to do a little bit of research to find them. And so I would say just kind of err on the side of caution of that. Let's see, what else do we have?
Dr. East, there was a question early on.
Yes.
Any tips specifically for kids?
Yes, sweetie. I'm so sorry. I'm a 5-year-old. Yes.
Oh,
Come on, come again. What, buddy? I'm still working. Okay. Sorry.
No, I love it.
All right, here you go, babe.
Any tips specifically for kids
You're welcome.
entering
Okay, get
a
out
new
the camera.
school?
Go away. Okay, I'm sorry.
Just the question about any tips specifically for kids entering a new school, like incoming kindergartners.
I think that one of the things that I did with my son is I talked about his special shirt or his special thing that he would wear or take with him to school on the first day. That could be a talking piece for him. And so to me, just giving kids an opportunity to find something that they can collaborate on or have a conversation about often takes away the fear that they have of someone being, of being new. So I would say that would be great for interacting with another kid because it's kind of like a show and tell moment. I would also reframe the new school as an adventure because that's what it is. I think that oftentimes when we say, well, you're going to a new school and none of your old friends are going to be there, but guess what? You get new friends. They didn't hear any of that. All they heard was that they're going to a new school and none of their friends are going to be there. And so instead of saying, how are you feeling? Are you ready for your first day at your new school? Be like, are you ready for your first day of your adventure? And paint it in that picture because children are very whimsical. They still believe, as we click our heels together. We wish we still had some of that Stardust magic, right? But kids still have that belief system. So I think if you frame it in a way that it's an adventure for him, it's an opportunity for him or her, or it's, I think that will change the way they feel about it because you're changing the way they see it.
Right.
All right. Well, this has been phenomenal. Dr. East, I cannot say thank you enough for taking.
Oh, I got one question I want to answer real quick.
Okay.
Okay. So, Michelle, you asked a question about, let me see. Okay. So what do we do with our children that are acting out aggressively? So let me just answer that because I'm sure this is a big one that a lot of parents want to know. I am one of those parents, spare the rod, spoil the child, but, spankings are not necessary for every single thing. So let me just be very clear about that. It's a disciplinary tactic that you can use if you like. But I think what we also need to recognize that when our children are having temper tantrums, partly it's because they don't know how to find the words that they need to express how they're feeling. The other piece of it is that they're frustrated with themselves. And so there's a lot of internal guilt. My point is there's lots of other residual reasons as to why the temper tantrum is taking place. And so I would say we have to be creative in the way that we discipline and that the discipline has to change depending on the behavior. So it may not always be a timeout. It may be them helping you in the garden, which to them may be a punishment, but it's also teaching them life skills. It may be them, helping you cook in the kitchen or giving them more chores where they separate their clothes, or it's also them being mindful. So when your son or daughter has that temper tantrum, what you do is you're quiet because you can't yell. The reason why you don't yell is that they think it's like a competition and it's not a competition. We're going to win. We're the caregiver. So what you do is you calm down and say, okay, whenever you're ready to talk, I'll be right here, and give them an opportunity to be ready to have the conversation. Once they're ready to have the conversation, then I would ask, kind of have like, what's up with that behavior? Like, why were you feeling that way? Or why are you frustrated? Let's say the kid is beyond reproach, that they are just having a meltdown and they're not really listening. The more we fuss and holler and scream and try to yank up and get their attention, the more they're going to have a meltdown, okay? My son has had a couple of temper tantrums in his life, and both of them, one took place in a store and one took place at our home. Both times I walked over him and proceeded to go around the corner. Now, I was not leaving my kid, right? You guys, I'm not going to leave call DCF on me. I wasn't leaving my kid, but I was not giving him an audience, which is something that he wanted at the time, and I was not going to give it to him. When he was able to stand up like a human being and have a conversation with me, even if it's emotional, we can have it. But the falling on the floor, I said, who is this kid? I don't know this kid. And I kept right on walking. And so, you know, when he realized like she's like not coming back, he jumped up and ran after me. So I think, you know, it's really finding out what is frustrating your kid. If they're able to have the conversation, if they're in meltdown mode, let them stay in meltdown mode, because you are not going to change that mode that they're in. When they calm down, then you can have the conversation. It's the same thing that we do with one another. When we're in a zone, we can't have the conversation. But when we finally calm down, then we're better at being mates and spouses and friends, because we're better able to talk. So I hope that was a little helpful and giving you guys some energy. Okay, I'm done.
No, this has been great. We were trying to monitor the chat, but you may have gotten some separately. So we do appreciate you taking the time to answer the questions. This has been so insightful. I was literally making note after note after note for myself, because you're opening the door for conversation. I mean, to have the authentic conversation with our kids, which is needed right now. So I'm personally grateful on behalf of the Office of Strategic Partnerships, which is directed or under the direction of Dr. Valerie Brim. We just want to say thank you so much for your time, and also for just being a part and leading this discussion today. We're very excited to continue this work in the future with all of our families in Pinellas County. We want to make sure that you are encouraged, and we want to encourage you rather to be in touch with our department. If you have questions or concerns that were not answered tonight, please feel free to email me. I placed my email in the chat, but I'll say it one more time, which is simmons.keo@pcsb.org. Know that you can also visit our district's webpage, www.pcsb.org, for a variety of resources and information. We will have this type of meeting once a month, so stay tuned for our next announcement for the next Parent Guardian Connection, also for our parent academies that take place as well out of our office. So thank you so much to all of our families for logging in tonight. Again, thank you, Dr. East, for taking the time to do this. We hope you all have a great night. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Be safe.